Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. Another one of those days where I go, boy, I love Joe Biden. I love that guy, Uncle Joe. This is why happy he's in the White House. The headlines were all accurate, absolutely accurate. Joe Biden did have an off-color moment. Everyone attacked him, everyone throwing it out there. And the headlines are accurate. Joe Biden did, in fact, say to a stupid question, Fox hack reporter Peter Doocy, on the way out of the room, shouted out, "Do you think inflation is a political liability ahead of the midterms?" And Joe Biden, I got to think he knew the microphones were on. I got to think it. But in a very sarcastic kind of way, like one of those under his breath kind of things that, yeah, it's a great asset. More inflation. What a stupid SOB. And I'm going, yeah, I could not agree more. Thank you, Joe, for what the rest of us were thinking. The only part of the stories that are inaccurate are the ones that are calling Peter Doocy a journalist. That's the part that's inaccurate. He's a Fox shill. He's only there to pump out the outrage candy. And good on Joe. It's about time. This is the Joe Biden that I want to see. Someone who's going to ball up the little digits and mix it up. At the end of the day, Democrats have been way too weak. Democrats have been absorbing blows and not fighting back. Maybe this is the time. Maybe this is the moment where Joe Biden has had, I've had enough of this. Enough of the bipartisanship, enough of the stuff that isn't coming. Maybe the reality that the Republican Party is never going to work with him no matter what he does has finally sunk in. And maybe now it's about, getting something done over the next couple of months, or at least appearing to be a little more muscular. And look, we're going to need that going forward because as a country, we're in a weird moment. Because internationally, thanks to the former guy and thanks to our weakness on Russia over the decades, you've got a very motivated Vladimir Putin who thinks that this is the moment. He thinks the country's weak. He thinks we're divided, and he's buying the right-wing outrage candy of, Joe Biden's weak. And this is a moment where we need to rise up. And again, what's going on in Ukraine? Sorry, not Biden's fault. We want to blame someone. Blame the former guy. Blame the guy before him and the guy before him. And I don't even blame Obama that much, simply because the Republicans were really willing to throw him under the bus. So we're in this weird moment that, from the moment that George W. Bush looked into Putin's soul and took their little drive around in that little midget car of Putin's, we've been heading towards this path. And sadly, who knows where this is going to go. And in this coming week, we're going to be talking a bunch about this as well. More interesting news from the defeated former guy. He's pretty upset. That the January 6th committee had the audacity to ask his daughter to come and testify. In fact, today he was screaming about how they have no morals. They'll come after the children. Yeah, she's a 40-year-old woman who was your main advisor. You, if anyone, put her in this position. If you wanted to shield the children, you shouldn't have put them in official capacity kind of jobs. Should have done like you did with Barron. Let the wife go run off wherever and take the kid with her. But no, didn't do that. Some good news coming out of Fulton County, Georgia. A panel of judges have cleared the way for a special grand jury. You remember the phone call? I'm sure we've all heard the audio where Trump called Brad Raffensperger and said, "Hey, I need 11,780 votes. Find them." I guess he thought they would just be laying around in the Secretary of State's couch cushions. He could just dig them right up. And I got to wonder how many of these other phone calls were had. But in Georgia, this special grand jury is going to be part of the District Attorney Fani Willis's investigation. And this, if of all of the stuff going on, of all of the stuff Trump's involved in, from his business stuff to January 6th, this is the most dangerous. This is for him the most dangerous. The one that could actually get him, I don't know, a slap on the wrist. I'm not going as far as saying jail, although he should be. But something should come out of this, which is why Republicans are going full tilt boogie on the midterms in hope that they're going to be able to take control of the House and Senate. And then they will show us. And I think Gingrich's comments on the January 6th committee kind of interesting, because he's going on and saying, well, when Republicans take Congress, it's going to come crashing down, and they're going to find out because we're going to put them all in jail. This is what authoritarians do. So again, it's voting time. When it comes around, make sure you're registered. Make sure you get out to vote. And I liked what Liz Cheney tweeted out. Basically saying that what Gingrich was saying is, this is what it looks like when the rule of law unravels, when there are no norms, when no one is being held accountable. And this is why I've been just beyond myself for the last year, going, why aren't we getting these people locked up? Why aren't there more of them? Why haven't we gotten the moneyed interest? Why haven't we locked them up yet? Why are there people still walking free? I know, Rick, the wheels of justice grind slowly. I get that. But the committee, we should be much further down the road. And I know. You don't want to give away too much information. I get all the excuses. We need movement quicker. Some good news on the worker front. And this is one of those stories I followed over the weekend that just, really, are we in America now? For background, Thursday evening, a bunch of workers from this ThedaCare company, healthcare hospital workers at this ThedaCare, 7 of them, decided that they were going to take another job. They were going to leave this ThedaCare and they were going to move to Ascension, another hospital, another medical facility, and they were going to go. And instead of the hospital, this ThedaCare hospital, saying no, don't go. Here's something better. Here's we're gonna meet your demands. We're gonna listen. We're gonna treat you better. Pie on Thursdays. Something to entice them to stay. They said no, we're not gonna bother that. We're gonna get our lawyers and we're gonna go to court and get an injunction so that they can't leave. And I'm going, wait a second, did I miss something here? Now, they allege, for those who hadn't followed this, they allege that this Ascension healthcare system came over and tried to poach these workers, which even still, freedom of movement. Now, the judge last week, temporary injunction, said, no, you can't leave just yet, because I still don't know why. Over the weekend, these people couldn't take this other job, but this Judge McGinnis ruled that, not yet, urged the two parties to come to an agreement. And look, if I'm the Ascension Healthcare people, I'm going, look, these folks came to us. We hired them. They should be able to start. This is how this game is played. Today, he comes out and he says the workers can be free to go work somewhere else. How wonderful that is that a judge gratefully told these workers that they can go work where they would like to work. That is remarkable. But it's kind of the world that we're in at this moment. Now, clearly this ThedaCare place, they've got some problems. They had to cancel all of their non-emergency surgeries. They had to cancel a bunch of stuff, and they had to go scramble to find people. Now, this is one of those situations where if you're in healthcare, you could be negotiating yourself and your coworkers some pretty decent things, because 1 in 5, I found it actually kind of low. 1 in 5 healthcare workers have left the job and left gone, which, wow. And you go, if the kind of wages that healthcare workers are getting, now understand, right now they're overworked, they're understaffed, they're being treated horribly, but they do make a reasonable living. If they're going to be going to the courts to demand that people don't leave their jobs, unfortunately, it didn't happen. They eventually said, no, you can go. But the fact that corporate America, that's their first inclination, tells you where we are as a nation. It's not about trying to make people's lives better. It's not about trying to improve conditions or want you to stay. It's about forcing you and being used to you being forced to stay in these positions. Which is why when I saw this AP story this morning from Elkview, West Virginia, it's about some workers who work in a fast food restaurant. It's this biscuit place, Biscuit World, which in West Virginia, I'm told, kind of a big deal. But the story went into about these workers who've been treated like garbage, poorly paid, overworked, understaffed, all of this stuff, and them finally going, we need a union. And this is one of those moments where you go, the light bulb finally went on. In West Virginia, basically, a place where if you're in your 50s and 60s, you knew people who fought in the Cold Wars. You had relatives who had, the stories of being bludgeoned on a picket line by the National Guard. You heard the stories of the miners trying to, survive. And then turning those jobs into good, solid, middle income, middle wage jobs that supported a family with good health care, good retirement, and some safety standards. So you learned the lessons of people's lives getting better because, well, they came together. This story is kind of like in that vein where the people are going, hey, wait a second, our heritage is steeped in this idea that collective action can make lives better. And now this fast food restaurant is in the process of organizing in this tiny little town in West Virginia, about 2,000 people there. And, you get into the story and it's the same thing in backwaters nowhere in West Virginia as it is in Bessemer, Alabama, or New York City, where these companies get away with harassing, intimidating, threatening, doing all these horrible things that our laws just continue to allow them to get away with. And this is where, again, I come back to our Supreme Court. We're led to believe, we're a country of laws, that, we're free, all this stuff. And yet, what happens? I'm waiting for a fast food place to come and say, no, you can't work anywhere else. You've got to work for me. Oh, that's right. They did try. You remember a couple years ago when Jimmy John's, the sandwich shop, made their sandwich makers sign non-compete agreements, which means that they couldn't go work at a restaurant making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich because, well, bread and everything between is proprietary information, according to the non-compete that minimum wage workers were forced to sign. This is how corporate America strangleholds people into these situations. And I'll tell you, I'm hoping beyond hope, that people rise up and say, no more. I'm hoping. And I'm hoping in a place like West Virginia, people go, hey, Senator Manchin, this is the place where labor was basically birthed, where the fight for a middle-class existence, the fight for dignity and respect was our heritage. Not that stupid flag with the big blue X, but fighting for better opportunities for ourselves, for our children, for our communities. This most recent study put out, the impact of a poverty reduction intervention on infant brain activity. That's what it's called, published by the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And they found, shocking, oh my God, shocking. They found that feeding kids, here it comes, helps their brains. Who knew? Who could have possibly known that if you feed infants, that they're going to have better brain activity, that they're going to thrive, that they're going to do better? Who could have possibly imagined that? Hold on, wait a second. Oh yeah, anyone with a rational, thoughtful brain. And yet what we've got is this past January 15th, The first time that check didn't go out to give us, especially folks on the bottom end of the socioeconomic ladder, the security of ensuring that there's a little bit of income to help feed those children. Now they go through this thing and say, well, it was this casual, impact study on poverty reduction intervention, on early childhood folks, and a lot of jargon that goes into it. It was basically just going, hey, we gave poor people some money. Poor people spend it the way they were supposed to on food and on shelter and on things that they need. And it made, oh my gosh, it made a difference. It made someone's life better. And this is where I keep coming back to reality. All of the things that divide us, all of the things that are meant to pit us against one another, the one constant for me is always coming back to wages, hours, conditions. How do we take care of ourselves, our children, and our families? How do we make sure that we take care of our communities? And how do we do that? Well, we do it through our work. Work has dignity, work has value, work should be respected. Kind of my wheelhouse. I believe all of our problems can be solved with a robust economy designed to help lift people up instead of keeping us in poverty, like a healthcare system going to court to force workers to work for them, like a fast food place making people signing non-compete agreements to where they can't even make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich somewhere else. That's what I'm talking about. We need labor law reform, and in the worst way. And when you've got senators like Manchin and Sinema, when you've got people who are standing in the way of feeding children, I mean, you hear Donald Trump going, they're going to go after the children. I don't care about your 40-year-old daughter and the crimes that she committed just yet. I'm worried about those kids who aren't, this month, aren't going to get the nutrition that they need to help them thrive. Aren't going to get what they need now so that they don't succeed later, that they have deficiencies later, and it costs us much more down the road, and all kinds of remedial costs and catch-up programs that, you know what, sadly, those don't get funded either. I'm of the mindset that we need to be investing in people early, often, and help people on the bottom rise up, because we'll all do better then. But we've still got Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema. Elections have consequences. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of our program, podcast. Get the podcast at the website, thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back, Rhode Island Senator Sheldon Whitehouse going to be here to share some thoughts on work in America and, well, big dark money and the corrosive effects. Back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1874. That was the day Arturo Alfonso Schomburg was born. Schomburg was an important figure in the Harlem Renaissance. He is also considered a premier historian and collector of material on black life in America. Born and raised in Puerto Rico, he arrived in the United States in 1891 and soon settled into the Cuban and Puerto Rican working class neighborhoods of New York City. Schomburg initially involved himself in the Cuban and Puerto Rican independence movements. When he traveled to New Orleans, he experienced Jim Crow discrimination and witnessed black disenfranchisement firsthand. He reacted strongly to the increased racial tensions, lynchings, and race riots of the period, and believed that history must restore what slavery took away. In 1911, Schomburg and his friend John Edward Bruce founded the Negro Society for Historical Research and established lasting friendships with intellectuals like W.E.B. Du Bois. He worked for the inclusion of black history into the educational system and continued to amass a wide collection of literature, art, books, pamphlets, and manuscripts on black life and history. His collection spanned materials from across the globe. It included letters of Haitian revolutionary Toussaint Louverture, poetry by Phyllis Wheatley, artifacts from Frederick Douglass, and other black leaders. Schomburg's private collection became the basis for the 135th Street branch of the New York Public Library's Division of Negro Literature, History, and Prints, which opened in 1925. The division served as a pivotal resource for Harlem Renaissance writers, poets, and artists. Known today as the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, it is recognized as the leading repository for materials and artifacts on black cultural life. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Howard from Chicago sent me an email recently, and one of those things that I find quite interesting, because how I've been saying for the longest time that Joe Biden has been the most pro-worker president of my lifetime, and Howard wanted to make an argument for Donald Trump, and I guess this is one of those moments where you go, if something affects your life and your life's been made better, maybe this is it. And he pointed out that Donald Trump was the guy who got the raise in the overtime threshold. If you remember, overtime 23.6 is what it was before they could exempt you from overtime, which meant you could work 100 hours a week for 23.6 a year, as long as they gave you a nice little title. Well, Donald Trump got it raised up to $35,000, and for this, Howard was eternally grateful. But Howard didn't quite understand that what Trump had done was cut his raise in half, because Obama actually wanted to raise it to $47,000. And this is, again, another one of those weird moments where facts matter and what you understand matters as well. And again, we went through a whole process of why I thought Donald Trump was the worst president for working people. And the big part of it was the Janus decision. He's the guy who appointed Neil Gorsuch, who finally made the decision to make the entire country a no rights at work country for public sector workers. And here to share some thoughts on that decision and maybe make the argument of why Joe Biden could be the greatest president for working people ever. I've asked Sheldon Whitehouse to come talk with us. Sheldon Whitehouse is the senator from the great state of Rhode Island. Senator, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be with you, Rick. I appreciate you having me on.
So I'm looking at this conversation I have with Howard, and Howard is very into it. I got a raise, and it was Donald Trump who got something for me, and that's all he saw. And I think that happens with a lot of people.
Yeah, well, a lot of what gets done to working people is done behind the scenes and done through undemocratic means. And that's really our topic today with the Supreme Court, I guess, huh?
Yeah. Now, the argument that I made to him, and look, the Janus decision was not the first assault by the Supreme Court. I've said for the longest time, our Supreme Court is not a conservative court, it's a corporate court. The moneyed interests seem to always get what they want, and silencing the voice of workers has always been high on their list. And this Janus decision, which very few people heard of at the time, and still very few people have heard of, is one of the centerpieces of the assault on organized labor and working class people in this country. Now, you were at the center of this. You actually were part of filing an amicus brief against it. Walk us through what, from your perspective, what the case was about, and ultimately what you think it accomplished or didn't accomplish.
So there are four cases you need to keep in mind, because this is not just a case, it's a little story, it's a saga. The first case is called Abood. The second case is called Knox. The third case is called Friedrichs. And the grand finale was Janus. What Abood did is it said that if you're a public union and you are representing a group that's larger than your membership, the non-members have to kick in a contribution for the benefits that you negotiate for them. Fair deal. The court had supported it for a long time. Even Justice Scalia had agreed with it. That was the state of the law. Then comes Justice Alito. And in the second case, Knox, he sends up a little flare saying, I really don't like this Abood rule very much. Somebody ought to think about challenging that to us, which was a signal that the right wing instantly responded to in Friedrichs. So they brought a case, they rushed it to the Supreme Court. Literally, Rick, they went into the district court and the appellate court and said, please rule against me quick as you can. I'm here to lose. I've been a lawyer a long time. I've never heard of lawyers coming into a court and saying, hey, I'm here to lose. But they knew they had a friendly ear at the Supreme Court. They were trying to get there as quickly as they possibly could. They rushed the case up there, and then boom, wouldn't you know it, Justice Scalia died before the decision could come out. So they didn't have a 5-4 majority any longer. 4-4 tied, went to the runner. The decision had gone the other way in the Ninth Circuit. So all their plans blew up. Then comes Gorsuch, as you mentioned. As soon as he's on the court, back they come again. Same high speed, we want to lose as quickly as possible litigation strategy, same plaintiff of convenience. Indeed, they filed the case before Mr. Janus actually became a plaintiff. So they're clearly just using the plaintiffs like little chess pieces to move the case to the court. They get up to the court, and of course, they got what they had hoped for in Friedrichs, bingo, a 5-4 decision, taking a shot at public employee unions by no longer allowing them to be compensated for the work they do, essentially requiring them to work for free for the non-union members. And across that saga, you saw a constant flow of dark money front groups, very often with a common funder behind them, so that what you saw in the courtroom was just the tip of the iceberg, and most of the action was going on out of sight.
No, you're absolutely right. I still remember the clip of Scott Walker, the governor of Wisconsin, and the construction billionaire Diane Hendricks, and her asking, in the most frenzied of way, when do we get right to work? When do we get to pass this assault on labor? Now, that was in the private sector. This, in the public sector, took states' rights away, took all that away, and overdid, as you said, in the Abood decision, 40 plus years of decided law. And I hearken back to John Roberts, saying, hey, we're going to call balls and strikes. I believe in decided law, stare decisis, all this stuff. And out of whole cloth, they dreamt up a whole new decision.
Yeah, they've got an interesting view of precedent on the right wing of the court, which is that they're all for precedent, and the importance of precedent while they're having to be confirmed and having to go through the rituals of the confirmation process. But once they get on the court, the respect for precedent, including this 40-year-old precedent upon which states, municipalities, counties had relied, had built their labor contracts, it had really been embedded. They blew all that up, really at the behest of a right-wing group called the Bradley Foundation.
And really, it comes back to the Olin foundations, the Bradley foundations, the Koch brothers' money, all of this billionaire money, and it's amazing how we give tax cuts and created the largest billionaire class in history. And we're told they're smart, they know what to do with the money, Senator, and they do. They assault working people, they move jobs overseas, and they enrich themselves at the expense of the people who actually created the wealth in this country and built it. And now we're in this moment where now there's this great resignation going on, and people are going, hey, we're not putting up with this anymore. We're not taking these crappy jobs. And now we've got them going to the courts and literally wanting the courts to not allow people to quit jobs because it would be injurious to their businesses, which is just incredible to me.
Yeah, the maneuvering behind the scenes is the thing that is quite remarkable. If you go back to Friedrichs and Janus, those cases that were rushed to the court, the lawyers who went into the court saying, please, can I lose, and quickly, they were right-wing special interest groups. And the one that was the lawyer for Mrs. Friedrichs came back in the Janus case as a friend of the court to argue the same point. And the ones that represented Mr. Janus had been friends of the court in Friedrichs. They just switched hats. And if you look at the case, there were, I want to say, 14 amicus groups that all came in, that were all funded by the Bradley Foundation, that never disclosed their common funding, and pretended to the court that this was this sort of manifestation of broad and multiple support, when in fact it's all tentacles of the same big squid, which is the Bradley Foundation.
But isn't that the entire right-wing framework? And this is where the right does this much better than the left does. The right has built an incredible infrastructure. Their state policy network of think tanks all across the country, the incestuous pool of information that they create and then regurgitate through their media. They have really built an echo chamber second to none. And again, it comes back to it's this billionaire money that has created this environment of misinformation and, well, distortion and lies. Let's just call it what it is. That's got people like Howard who are thrilled that they got a little bit of a raise instead of what they should have gotten and what they should have been entitled to. And poor Howard, he's grateful for the crumb he got.
Yeah. Yeah. And the deliberateness of it is really plain. There was a memo out of the Bradley Foundation that was leaked talking about their funding of these briefs. And they said it is very important to orchestrate high caliber amicus efforts, plural, that showcase respected high profile parties who are represented by the very best lawyers with strong ties to the court. And they confessed that Bradley had what they called previous philanthropic investments in the actual underlying legal actions. So they're on all sides of this, manipulating these front groups into positions. And I'll confess to you, Rick, that I think one of our worst failing as Democrats has been that we've done a terrible job at showing the public what's really going on here. It looks like there are 14 legit interest groups coming in, filing amicus briefs. Nobody really gets the joke that it's the Bradley Foundation and the right-wing billionaires around it that are pulling the strings for the whole damn operation.
Yeah, we used to have Lisa Graves on from the Center for Media and Democracy all the time talking about this because it's that pool of money. It's that billionaire money that allows all of this other stuff. It's all of it. It's the assault on workers. It's the assault on women. It's the assault on inequality. It's the assault on, well, the 20th century, as I've been saying. They want to take us back to the good old days of the 80s and 90s, and not the 1980s and 90s.
Yeah, I did a appendix, a graph in one of my Supreme Court briefs that showed all the common funding of the front group briefs taking the other side. And Center for Media and Democracy took a look at that and said, bet you we can do better. And they did. They did an even deeper dive into who was funding all of these different groups. So I'm a big fan of Center for Media and Democracy. They do a great job. We as Democrats don't do a great job of letting everybody know what their work is showing us.
No, you're so spot on. And this is why, with all the stuff that's going on around the January 6th committee and all of the information about what we're finding out about January 6th, I, from the beginning, have said, I don't care about the guy who defecated on the floor. We'll hold him accountable. The guy who urinated on the desk, we'll get them. What I want is the moneyed interest who funded all of this. I want the people who paid for the buses. I want the people who put these groups together, who filled these people's minds with disinformation and lies, to enrage them to the point to where they were willing to kill police officers in our capital. Those are the people we really need to go after.
Yes. Some call that aiding and abetting. Some call it being a co-conspirator. Some call it being an accessory before or after the fact. There are a lot of legal doctrines that I very much hope the Department of Justice is pursuing to look beyond just the people who showed up at the Capitol that day and look at the people who were basically the kingpins, the funders, the organizers, and the orchestrators.
Absolutely. And again, it come back to I want those people held responsible and exposed on all of these fronts. And this is why I brought Howard up in this whole thing, because Howard, he feels grateful for the little bit he got. He doesn't realize how these billionaires who have been telling him for all these years, you don't need those stinking unions, you're your own boss, you're an individual, you're all this stuff, and how his life has gotten worse and worse over the years, and his work has gotten harder and longer. And I keep coming back to this moment. He was grateful to Trump for that little bit of an increase. And this is why I reach out to my Democrats and I go, reality, Senator, we got to make people's lives better. We need legislation to move that's going to help families. It's going to make for opportunities for our children, because that's what people need more than the rhetoric that they're being fed in the outrage candy that they're being fed on the right.
Yeah, once you saw Citizens United allow unlimited money come into politics, and once the unlimited money figured out how it could hide its identity, so that you see a phony baloney ad on your screen from, Americans for Peace and Puppies and Prosperity, and you look it up and it's the front group with a, mail drop. But they've somehow got the money to run an ad on your TV about politics. Once that all happened, then you began to see Congress statistically in ways that academics could look at and quantify and write peer-reviewed studies about, stop representing the American public at large and start delivering for big special interests. And the people have noticed.
Yeah. And this is why I come back to your institution.
It makes them mad.
This is why I come back to your institution. The Senate seems to be the place where all progress for working people goes to die. And I'm looking at the Voting Rights Act right now. I'm looking at Build Back Better right now, and all the things that could do to help make people's lives better. This is what's important. Got to get something done. There have got to be things that people see as, hey, this made my life better. All of my rhetoric about Biden being the best pro-union president, the best pro-worker president, doesn't matter if people don't feel it in their paychecks.
Yeah, indeed. And there's no real reason to feel it right now because Congress has been contorted by all of this dark money, special interest spending, and we've got to break the back of it. And I'm hoping very much that now that the Build Back Better is going to have to be rebooted in some fashion, and now that we've had this, I think, terrible self-inflicted defeat with the Voting Rights Act, I'm really hoping that the Biden administration will now focus on what is behind all of this. They don't talk much about dark money. I think the president has only used the phrase one time in his entire presidency. But if you want to get the American people rallying around you and you can point out what's really going on, who was that radio personality who used to say the end of the story?
And now the Paul
now
Harvey. And now the rest
Harvey,
of the story.
Exactly. People want to hear the rest of the story, the thing that twists it, that clarifies it, that sort of brings the new reality to it. And I hope that Joe Biden becomes the voice against dark money and for the working people who the dark money enterprise is out to screw.
No, it is something that sorely needs to be done. Senator, I appreciate you taking some time. I hope you'll come back and as this continues and keep us up to date on what you're doing and how we can help, because more importantly than anything, we've got to get active. We've got to get involved. Appreciate the time,
Yep.
Senator.
And we need to call out the court that dark money built.
There you go. Great stuff. Thanks so much, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. If you got thoughts, you got questions, you can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we've been hearing a lot about the Great Resignation. We've been hearing a lot about, 4.5 million people saying, you know what, I've had enough, I'm leaving the job, going to go do something else. Or, look, I realize that I can make it without having to work, and they drop out of the labor force altogether. Some bad outcomes, sure, but the reality is people finally waking up to the reality that they've got power. I had a listener who sent me this article from the Chronicle of Higher Education. It was titled "The Great Faculty Disenfranchisement," or "The Great Faculty Disengagement." Sorry. And they go through this article of going, the Great Resignation is happening in society. Yes, not really so much in higher education as what's going on is people are leaving for other opportunities. They're becoming consultants, they're doing other jobs, but worse, they're doing the minimum. They're doing their job, but they're kind of backing out of it. And this is one of those things where if your model is how cheap can we get people in, how low can we pay them, how can we abuse them, how can we spread them so thin that they're teaching at several different universities and have no real allegiance to one or the other, it's no wonder that people go, yeah, I'm going to do my job. I'm going to come in, turn the factory line on, and stamp out widgets. But that's all you're getting out of me. That is a horrible place for a higher education system to go. And this is purely predictable because we've been heading down this path for a long time. And again, the pandemic brought it out to our attention. Will we do something about it? The hope is, we do something about it. And as I've been saying, one of the ways forward is for those professors, those adjuncts, those educators to organize, unionize, fight for better wages, hours, conditions in a contract, have it in writing, and hold people to it, which is why I'm thrilled to hear that the local community college in my neck of the woods, the Harrisburg Area Community College, their faculty is in the process right now, I guess, of having a vote to unionize. And that's why I've asked Lewis Jones to come talk with us. Lewis is an adjunct professor and the head of the organizing campaign there at the Harrisburg Area Community College. Lewis, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's great to be back.
So walk me through this. Where are you? Last time we spoke, you guys were up in the air. There wasn't anything going on. The college head was doing everything he could do to stall, delay, cause headache. Where are we right now?
Well, you're right. He did everything he could to stall and delay, but we have won through. The PA Labor Relations Board has ruled in their favor and actually scheduled an election. The election will be starting next in February on the 24th. It'll be going out by mail. Votes will be returned by the 7th, with the actual counting happening on April 8th. It's been a long time coming. We started this over almost 2.5 years ago, trying to get this off the ground. And we spent the past year and a half watching the administration, specifically the president, do everything they could to stop us from moving forward. And to be honest, they followed the playbooks for Union Busting 101 completely as part of this. Everything they can do to disenfranchise, to frustrate, to actually disillusion adjunct faculty members, full-time faculty members, they've done it. But we've prevailed, and we are happy to say we are going to have a vote.
No, that is fantastic news to hear, because it's something that has to happen, and it's having that voice and that ability to make these careers and not just jobs. And I look at this report, and the reason I brought this report up because as I was reading through it, I immediately thought of you and hopefully the members of your union when they win that election. And I'm thinking about people who, when I've taken classes, people who were dedicated, who would stay extra time, you could call in off hours. They were dedicated to their students because that was their living. That's what they were doing. They didn't have to go work at McDonald's afterwards. They didn't have to go to another university. They didn't have to race across town to do something else. That was their job. Their job was to get me to get the most out of that class that I could get. And I'm concerned that this article is where education is going, where it's purely transactional. I'm going to come in, here's the book, here's the test, figure it out. That's a concern.
That is unfortunately, what I would say is what we're seeing is the idea of turning education into a for-profit business. And this has become the problem with a lot of higher education today. They want to see how quickly they can turn things around and get the buck in, and is at the loss of giving students the attention they need. By having the ability to actually come together as a union, one of the things we can do is it's not about, as I tell you, it's not about the pay. It's about being able to stand forth and look at the administration saying, this is what our students need. And we need to have access to all the resources. They need to have those access to resources because our community depends upon us to prepare them to be the future of our country, to be those productive members of our citizenry. But if they're not getting what they need and we don't have the ability to do it because we're too worried about where we're going to be going next to work, because we don't have benefits, we don't have guaranteed salaries, we don't have guaranteed classes that we know we're going to be teaching, well, that means we're constantly worried about what's going to happen next. We have no guarantees, which means it affects our students.
Yeah, and if you're overloaded to the point to where all you're doing is racing from one place to another, you don't have time for that personal interaction. You know, when I was in school, you know, this is going back years ago, you know, you had professors who had 2, maybe 3 classes at the most. I have friends right now who are teaching 5, 6 classes at different places because they're adjuncts here and there, and they're piecing together an existence based on, you know, a class here, a class there. And every, as you pointed out, every semester, they don't know whether they can plan on that or not, and then they got to be hustling for other ones. This is no way to run a higher education system. If truly a college education is the pathway to the middle class, if that's how we're going to get ahead, shouldn't we put some money into making sure it's the best education we can get, considering we're paying a ton for it?
Well, yeah, I would say yes, because it's about professionalism. You have a large number of people who are putting in the time, putting in the money to get degrees so that they can turn around and in turn help to educate our population, our children, our brothers, our sisters, our mothers, our uncles, our aunts. But if they're not going to be treated as professionals in their own profession, if they're going to be working basically for slave wages, when you think about it, because most people can't even pay off their student loans that they're accruing to try to become the best teacher, because we're constantly trying to learn. We're constantly going to conferences. If we're not being given the ability to actually make ourselves the professionals we are and being treated as those professionals, that's going to make it hard to look at those students and say they're getting the best education possible. Because if their professors are worried about what they're going to be doing to feed their family, take care of the needs of somebody, if their child gets sick, they're not going to be able to focus on what they're there for.
Absolutely.
And it's about respect and professionalism. And that's all. That's all we're asking as adjuncts, as full-time professors. Anybody in higher education wants to be treated as the professional they are, given the respect they're due for the work and the effort they've put forth to get to this point.
Right.
And if you're being treated as a piece of just a puzzle piece that we can take it in, pull it in and out like a Lego and find a new wedge to put in there because you're disposable, then you're not going to be doing the students any favor. It becomes then it's all about who's making the most money for that college. It's really getting down to those trustees, to those people that they feel are the true stakeholders, which in their opinion, it means they're not looking at the faculty and the students as the real stakeholders.
No, and I look at this, and again, you know, I come back to a thing you just said a minute ago, that we were turning all of higher education into the for-profit model. And to me, this is another one of those things where, I'm sorry, the for-profit stuff doesn't work. I hear a lot of this. This is evidently is school choice week or whatever it is. And I say, you know, I don't necessarily want choice. I want a really good, well-funded, well-staffed option. Give me a local solid public school with a fully funded, system where they can take all the classes they want, extracurriculars, vocational, all of that stuff, and have teachers who are dedicated to that school because they're making a living wage. Give me that, because in places that have that, they thrive, they do well, and it's for the betterment of the community. For me, it's the same thing with higher education. This for-profit model of, I have all these choices. Yeah, it's one bad choice after another. So for me, give me a great option. Give me a local community college that's going to help give skills to hundreds and maybe thousands of people who would not had it otherwise. Give me that option. Because ultimately, and you know this as well as anyone, Lewis, we're leaning heavily on the work that you and your coworkers are doing to help us move forward in the 21st century, to get workers the skills at the community college level more so than at the university level, to get people the skills, to get the jobs that they need to support their families.
Well, every student that comes into the community college is coming there for a reason. Most of them are coming there to actually improve on the skill set they have, or create a new skill set. And these professors are dedicated to making sure these students get the best of everything they need. But the fact of the matter is, when you've got institutions that are looking at it as well, if we want them coming in because we need their tuition, because that's how we make our profit. If that's the only focus, you're focused on the wrong thing, because that's not what education has ever been about. It's never been about making money. It's been about making critical thinkers that can solve the problems we have today to give us a better future for tomorrow.
Yeah, but here's the thing. It's in the name. It's a community college. Should this not be something funded by the community, accessible by the community, and affordable for the community? Is this not a failure of our state government, and even on a certain level, the federal government, for demanding all of these things of our community colleges and then not adequately funding them? Isn't this part of that?
Yes, indeed. I mean, the fact of the matter, if we look at the system of education we have in the United States right now, we failed. We're failing at the state level. We're failing at the federal level. We're failing at the local level because we're not putting the money where it needs to go. We tend to put it at the top, paying for a large number of administrators, but it's not going to the people who are actually having to do the work. We're actually going to be spending the time working with the students. It's not going into the resources the students need in the classroom. I mean, to be honest, I sat there and watched a lot of colleges, both community colleges and universities, and they increase the administrators. They decrease the faculty, or they outsource faculty to part-time faculty, adjunct faculty, and they say, well, it's a cost savings because we don't have to pay benefits. We don't have to worry about giving them sick time, sick leave, because if they do, they don't get paid. So it's a cost savings. COVID's made it even worse because now we can say, oh, let's leave all the students at home, charge them the same tuition, but they're not going to have to set foot on the campus. So that means we're saving money by not opening up the building. They don't have access to the resources in the library. They don't have the access right hand to their professors to go ask those questions they need. They don't get the in-person contact they need. And it's all about cost savings. But the problem is that cost savings isn't going anywhere where it needs to go. Yeah. Because it's not going back to help the students.
No, you're right there. So let me ask you, Lewis. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Lewis Jones. Lewis is an adjunct professor of anthropology at the Harrisburg Area Community College. Their website, if you want to check out what they're doing, hawkfacultyunite.org. We'll get links out on social media on how you can take a look at that. How do you see when your coworkers, make their decision whether you're going to join and form a union here very soon? How do you see this helping? More than just the faculty? Do you see this as something that's going to help the overall campus, help the students? What are you hoping to gain out of it, other than just what most people say? It's just about the wages, Lewis.
Well, first of all, first thing I tell them, it's not about the wages only. For us, it's about the community, because the fact of the matter is, when we have to stop worrying about how we're taking care of our own needs, we can truly focus on what our purpose is. And that is making sure every student gets what they need, that when our community partners come in looking for employees, they know they're getting the best trained employees they could possibly hope for. That when that student looks to go on to get that nursing degree, to become that welder, to become that medical assistant, they know that they're getting someone who's been trained well and can actually think through the problems they might encounter in their day-to-day jobs. But it's also about family, because we are a family. We live in these communities. We are the families in this community. Our children go to these schools, our family, our friends, our relatives. So the real thing about it is, it's not about just us as getting a salary. It's about rebuilding community and making connections and really having a true partnership with the college. They talk about shared governance all the time. Well, shared governance has failed because it's always been a one-way street. Do what they say, and they might listen to us, but that doesn't mean they have to. When they have to sit down and negotiate what we're doing, and they have to come to an agreement, then you can truly say, okay, this is what we want on the table so it benefits our students. we're not going to focus just on ourselves. We're going to focus on the whole picture. How can we make this a better college going into the future?
Oh, I mean, and lastly, and this is where we'll leave this, lastly, what ends up happening is you get people who are dedicated to the place where they're working because they're making a decent living and the ability to support their families, and they don't have to do a whole bunch of other side hustles and things, and they can dedicate their time, their effort, their energies into making sure they do the best job possible and not end up like what we were talking about, this disengagement that's happening around the country. As I took a class not too long ago where the adjunct professor was literally out of the country. And doing it out of a laptop, while riding in a cab. You go, that is not the best outcome. So last question, how can we help? What's the message in here going forward?
The message going forward is reach out, let HAC know. Let them know that you support their faculty having the ability to organize and work in partnership with them, not as just the workforce. This has got to be a partnership. And if they really, truly believe in working together for the benefit of the college, the administration itself should be supporting unionization, especially if they say they believe in social justice. Because we always hear that term. We believe in social justice. We believe in working for the rights of everyone. Well, if that's true, I ask everybody who's listening in to reach out and let the college know that they feel that they should be supporting us and not standing against us.
There you go. Louis, I appreciate you taking some time for us, sharing what's going on. I wish you guys the best. Anything we can do to help, please let me know. But thanks so much, Louis.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Good stuff. Louis Jones, he is an adjunct professor of anthropology there at the Harrisburg Area Community College. Also, one of the lead guys on the organizing there. You want to check out the work that they're doing, hawkfacultyunite.org. And look, we're seeing this all around the country. We're seeing, higher education professors going, hey, you know what? We've been getting screwed way too long. We've got to push back against what's happened. And it's about time. Like I said, I was taking a master's level course from somebody who was backpacking across China and teaching at a number of places. And I'll tell you, it was the worst class I ever took. There was no personal engagement. And I don't even think that the person who I was submitting my papers to was actually even reading them. That, to me, an enormous problem. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any portion of the program, grab the podcast at thericksmithshow.com. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1950. The minimum wage in the United States was raised to 75 cents an hour. This move nearly doubled the minimum wage from the previous 40 cents an hour. More than 22 million people were directly eligible for the wage increase. In his statement on the change, President Harry S. Truman declared, "It is a measure dictated by social justice. It adds to our economic strength. It is founded on the belief that full human dignity requires at least a minimum level of economic sufficiency and security." If the minimum wage had kept pace with inflation since 1950, it would now be over $10 an hour. The last time the federal government raised the minimum wage was 2009. It currently stands at a meager $7.25 an hour. Given the overwhelming Republican control of Congress and the enormous cash outlays by corporate lobbyist groups like the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, the National Restaurant Association, and others, it's doubtful that Congress will take up the question of raising the minimum wage anytime soon. Yet, next year, 21 states will raise their minimum wage. More than 3 million people will see a raise because of the state's measures. In 4 states, Alaska, Arkansas, Nebraska, and South Dakota, voters passed ballot measures to raise the minimum wage. In total, 29 states in the District of Columbia will have a higher minimum wage than the federal level. Washington State will have the highest state minimum wage at $9.47 per hour. Yet most states still lag well behind inflation. If the minimum wage is a measure dictated by social justice, where do we as a nation measure up? And what of Truman's call for human dignity? To date, only 2 presidents have failed to raise the minimum wage since its inception: Republican Ronald Reagan and Democrat Barack Obama. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at Labor History in 2.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. If you got a thought, question, want to chime in on something, or you can email me, rick@therricksmithshow.com. So the Supreme Court, again, our corporate Supreme Court, they've agreed to take a case on federal regulation of private property when it comes to water and anti-pollution measures. This is one of those weird things. You got this family, this couple who wants to build their home on this lake in Idaho. Evidently, have wanted to do it for years. And the EPA has ordered that they stop. Evidently, it's part of a wetlands that they say can't be disturbed without a permit. There's a whole process that goes along with this. And look, this comes down to some interesting moments where this is about, this is about one couple trying to build a house. But in essence, it's about a lot more than that. So when this case goes to the Supreme Court, this then becomes that case that goes, it's how we destroy the Clean Water Act. It's the beginning of that. It's that slippery slope. And I go back and I look at some of this stuff that, the moneyed interests always seem to get what they want. The moneyed interests have the ability to hire these lawyers, and we've got, like Sheldon Whitehouse was talking about a little bit ago, we've got a system in this country that's been set up by the corporate right wing, by the moneyed interests. I would say, I don't want to get into the right or to Republican or conservative, the corporatist wing. The moneyed interest want what's theirs. And this goes back all the way to, the 1971 Powell memo. All of this springs out of that. Powell wrote this treatise to save free enterprise, and it was all about tearing down unions, all about tearing down government regulation. It was all about taking over academia, the media. And look, if you read this short little 16-page memo, it's wow. Pretty remarkable at what they've accomplished, what money will get you in every state in this country. And I mentioned it earlier with Sheldon Whitehouse. There's a state policy network that's set up specifically to dream up bad ideas. In every state, there is at least one conservative right-wing corporate think tank who's out there pushing the idea of free markets and free government and, lower taxes and, leave business alone and deregulation. And they sit around and they pay people, huge money to dream up things like this. That's going to ensure that this becomes the next step in destroying our ability to regulate, our ability to have clean water, clean air. Or in the case that we were talking about with Sheldon Whitehouse, that was all set up. In the 1970s, they had decided in the Abood decision that, public sector workers who were represented by unions had to pay a fair share for the representation that they were getting. You didn't have to be a member, but you had to pay for what the union was negotiating. We didn't believe in free riders. We didn't believe in a free lunch. If you got something, you had to pay for it. And that was the law of the land for decades. Until the Knox case, when Alito, called that into question and said, hey, I'd really like someone to bring me a case to take a look at this Abood decision, because the Knox case was about healthcare, home healthcare workers in Illinois who, wanted to join a union, and all of these people who who take care of people, invalids and folks, quadriplegics and people and disabled people in their homes, were saying, hey, we're working long hours, we're getting poverty wages, we don't have any benefits. This is a long, hard, arduous job. We should be compensated for it. So they were trying to join a union, and they were moving towards that. And this Knox person's like, no, I should have the liberty and freedom not to. And they brought this in front of the Supreme Court, and well, it was what it was. But Alito then in that went further than taking that right away and saying that they weren't actual workers, and said, no, I want to look at the whole public sector. I want to look at the whole thing. And that's how the Friedrichs case came about. And in fact, out in California, they found a teacher who goes, no, I shouldn't have to pay union dues because of my sincerely religious belief. And it's amazing how all of this stuff springs out of religion. It's amazing how all of these people who are willing to destroy people's standards of living are all come from I love me some Jesus. And they did. They raced that Friedrichs case right through. Diane Friedrichs was the plaintiff, and they raced it through to get it to the Supreme Court, telling every lower court, don't care what you decide, I'm not even putting on a case, hope we lose. We just got to get it in front of that 5-4 Scalia court. And then, Scalia dies. And it's 4-4. And they decide the 4-4 decision, and that had to revert back to the lower court, which guess what? Ruled against them. And I was saying at the time, it's time for major comprehensive labor law reform. Now is the time to be fighting while we have this brief respite, because understand, the moneyed interests are not going to give up going after people's ability to join and form unions. Because look, that's how we've always held the wealthy accountable. That's how we've always gotten a little bit more in our paychecks. That's how we've always gotten better working conditions. That's how we've always gotten just a little bit better. Because guess what? There are no benevolent corporations. They don't give things out of the goodness of their heart. The only time you get something is when you demand it and you fight for it, which is what my grandparents' generation viscerally understood. My generation, somehow, we were led to believe that, oh no, if we give all these rich people everything, it'll trickle down on us. It'll rain down like rivers of gold and honey, and it'll be wonderful. It'll be utopia. We can all wear white shirts and sit in corner offices, and it'll be fabulous. And what ended up happening? Well, we destroyed the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization. Us and the baby boomers. I'm not letting the boomers off by any stretch of the imagination. But this is where we are. So it goes back, and we didn't do anything to get labor law reform done. Obama didn't do anything to get the Employee Free Choice Act pushed through. We did nothing to change the laws to help public sector workers and make it law that they had to do it. It was a decision. And now you're going, the next case. Janus in Chicago going after AFSCME in Illinois. And they do the same thing, race it through to get to the Supreme Court, because they knew Neil Gorsuch was already on board. Because understand, Neil Gorsuch, as a lower court judge, in one of his dissenting opinions, was willing to let a man die. Willing to let a man die on the side of the road, freeze to death, than to let him decouple his truck and go get warm somewhere. Here's a guy who pulled off to the side of the road in somewhere in the Midwest. I think it was Iowa, if I'm not mistaken. Freezing, bitter cold. Low on fuel, couldn't find a fuel stop. Pulls off the side of the road to check his map to find somewhere, and his brakes freeze. They literally freeze up. And as someone who's driven a truck, I know what that's like. So he calls. He said, "Hey, I need someone to get out here and get me somebody out here to help. Get me a vendor." So the company says, it's going to be a couple hours. He's low on fuel. He's turning the truck off. He's freezing. There's stories of that. He's calling family, and his speech is slurred. He's on the verge of hypothermia. Everyone agrees. So he does the sane, rational thing that each and every one of us would have done. Puts the legs of the trailer down. He decouples. He heads off to the next stop. Gets warm. When he gets back, the vendor's there. The company fires him. Gorsuch would have said, well, you're fired. There's the door. That's a problem. And it's infuriating to me. So was it surprising that he was going to make that decision in Janus? No. They already knew which way he was going. They already knew he was the guy. So here we are. You have a situation where in the public sector you've now created out of whole cloth a right-to-work environment. And what do we know about right to work is there are no rights and there's no work associated with it. What do we know? We know that in the places where we've allowed right to work to pass, wages have gone down, safe working conditions have gone away, retirement security, health security have gone down. The governor of West Virginia, Jim Justice himself, came forward and said, look, we now know right to work doesn't work. We now know that ending prevailing wage laws don't work. What do? They lower wages, they destroy conditions, they make things worse. And that's the reason that our corporate class so loves right to work laws. Let's go to the phone lines. I got Julie on line 3. Julie, how are we doing tonight?
Hi. See, thanks for taking my call. Rick, I was thrilled to hear Senator Whitehouse on your program. I haven't heard him interviewed on any radio program. And I just want your listeners to know that he did a masterful presentation during, when Coney Barrett was, going to be on the Supreme Court. And he laid out in just a masterful way Bradley Foundation, all the different dark money, how things orchestrated to funnel money to get, the individuals on the Supreme Court to politicians. And they can look that up. And it's so insightful. It's maddening, but it's super interesting.
No, Sheldon Whitehouse is an incredible guy, and I like him a lot. And you're right. He does lay out the dark money stuff, the Federalist Society that every judge that a Republican has put forth has to be given the okay on. Because understand, when Trump was nominating people, he didn't dream those names up. The Federalist Society handed him names.
Yeah, and I was unaware of how extremely complicated and the number of groups and individual billionaires, and it's a fascinating but terrifying thing that the American public really needs to know about. So thanks for taking my call, Rick.
Thanks, Julie, anytime. And look, she's right. At the end of the day, I don't think most Americans understand the whole inner workings of this machine, because it is a machine, and it's from top to bottom. And I've been saying this stuff for years. The reality is, and this all comes, I highly suggest, look up the Powell memo. Lewis Powell, who eventually became a Supreme Court justice, Nixon, nominated him to Supreme Court, and he was in on a bunch of bad decisions then. But he wrote this treatise on how to save free enterprise. And it was the playbook that they used to get us here. Out of that came the Heritage Foundation, the American Legislative Exchange Council, all of these think tanks that popped up everywhere and well-funded. And one of the things that the memo says is, hey, with a statesman-like sum of 10% of all profits, we can do this. So corporate America said, yeah, we're going to fund all this stuff, which is why when people finally figured out who the American Legislative Exchange Council, ALEC, was, they were shocked that, Coke and Pepsi and UPS and all these huge multinational companies were the ones who were funding it. Why? Because that was how they funded the horrible legislation that screws us all the time. And, I remember back in, 2011, 2012, there were bills that were going through the Pennsylvania State House. There were bills that were going through in Florida. There were bills going around that still had Alec's name on the legislation, because they would hand out model legislation and lazy Republican legislators would just turn it in. Because what they were doing is they were bringing these people to these exclusive resorts, whining and dining them, filling their campaign coffers. At the end of the day, it's all about the dark money. It's all about the cash that these billionaires, who we give them, may I add, because of the massive tax breaks that they've been given and the fact that they've been able to walk away from having to pay their fair share, we basically fund our own demise. So they spend all this money buying our legislatures, all across the country, shoving legislation through that benefit who? Not you, not me, but them. And what's infuriating about this is our media doesn't cover it. Why? Because they're dependent on who? Coke, Pepsi, UPS, American Airlines, all of these companies that were funding who? The American Legislative Exchange Council, the Heritage Foundation, all of these right-wing think tanks. And there's one of these in every state, and some states have 2 or 3. Because there aren't enough bad ideas to go around. And it's like, what Milton Friedman and I think Rahm Emanuel gets credited for it every once in a while. You never let a good crisis go to waste. And Friedman went so far as to say, it's the ideas that are laying around that get used in the moment of crisis, which is why these think tanks, they sit around and they dream this stuff up 24/7, 365. That's their goal. So that when crisis hits, I got a bad idea. Let's go forward. And this is what I've been saying about January 6th. This wasn't Trump's idea. You know that this was war gamed in one of these think tanks. And they said, "Hey, I got an idea of how we can usurp democracy. I got an idea of how we can get even more control for our billionaire funders and how we can get more money out of their pockets." And bang, there it was. And the thing is that they control our media levers because of the advertising dollars. Now, right-wing radio was funded without doubt by these corporate interests. So you think someone like the deceased Limbaugh was ever going to bite the hand that feeds him? No. You think Fox News, you think that's fair and balanced? No, it's corporate balanced. And what's good for profits, what's good for the bottom line is where they're going to go. Which is why I keep coming back to what has to be exposed about January 6th is not the idiot who took a dump on the floor, not the idiot who wore the stupid hat, but the people who funded it, the moneyed interests who made it possible, the moneyed interests who filled these people's heads with all of this nonsense, the people who are funding these organizations like the Oath Keepers and the 3 Percenters and the Proud Boys and all of the money that goes into the Alex Joneses and all of that has to be exposed. And what's interesting, and I think we will find out, is it's a handful of people, a handful of billionaires. Just like we found out with the Tea Party. It was a handful of billionaires who made that AstroTurf group look big. There was one billionaire who made, Americans for Prosperity look like an actual group. We have lots to do, without question. Love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Going to take a quick break. When we come back and talk about, hey, how can we turn things around? I still have hope. And that hope is you, me, us. While we still can, outvoting them. While they have the money, we've outprocreated them. We just got to get on the same page. We got to unite and vote. Quick break. Right back. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1874. That was the day Arturo Alfonso Schomburg was born. Schomburg was an important figure in the Harlem Renaissance. He is also considered a premier historian and collector of material on black life in America. Born and raised in Puerto Rico, he arrived in the United States in 1891 and soon settled into the Cuban and Puerto Rican working class neighborhoods of New York City. Schomburg initially involved himself in the Cuban and Puerto Rican independence movements. When he traveled to New Orleans, he experienced Jim Crow discrimination and witnessed black disenfranchisement firsthand. He reacted strongly to the increased racial tensions, lynchings, and race riots of the period, and believed that history must restore what slavery took away. In 1911, Schomburg and his friend John Edward Bruce founded the Negro Society for Historical Research and established lasting friendships with intellectuals like W.E.B. Du Bois. He worked for the inclusion of black history into the educational system and continued to amass a wide collection of literature, art, books, pamphlets, and manuscripts on Black life and history. His collection spanned materials from across the globe. It included letters of Haitian revolutionary Toussaint Louverture, poetry by Phyllis Wheatley, artifacts from Frederick Douglass, and other Black leaders. Schomburg's private collection became the basis for the 135th Street branch of the New York Public Library's Division of Negro Literature, History, and Prints, which opened in 1925. The division served as a pivotal resource for Harlem Renaissance writers, poets, and artists. Known today as the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, it is recognized as the leading repository for materials and artifacts on Black cultural life. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So the big news coming out of Virginia, evidently the office of the Virginia Attorney General, they've fired this investigator, Timothy Heapy, I guess it's his name, Heapy. He's one of the January 6th investigators. He was also one of the lawyers for the University of Virginia. He was one of the top lawyers there. And I look at this, and I have a lot of my liberal friends, a lot of my Democratic friends, who are losing their minds over how could they fire him? This is payback. This is payback for him being an investigator. Yeah, it is. This is how the game is played. This is why elections have consequences. This is why it was important for people in Virginia to get out and vote. And I think the sooner we learn that lesson, that elections have consequences, maybe the sooner we start showing up more often and, I don't know, not voting for crazy people. Just kind of a thought, which is why this next election, we're going to need all hands on board. And like every election cycle, it's all about the young people. Can we get the 18, 20, 22-year-olds to care enough to come out and vote? Can we rile them up and say, hey, this is your future? And like every other time, whether it was rock the vote or vote or die, it didn't quite happen. But here to share some thoughts on how maybe we can do it this time, I've asked Jack Lobel to come talk with us. Jack is the communications director of Voters of Tomorrow, votersoftomorrow.org, their website. Jack, thanks for taking some time for us.
Thank you so much for having me, Rick. Happy to be here.
So, I look at this story coming out of Virginia, and I'm not particularly upset about it. The guy got fired. He was put in place by the former governor. This governor is saying, hey, we live in a patronage world now, thanks to Donald Trump. He's got to go. It is what it is. Elections have consequences.
Yeah, elections do obviously have consequences. I think we've seen from the Georgia runoff elections, which were obviously won by now Senators Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock, and to the election of Joe Biden to the presidency, elections do have consequences. I think in each case, which is why I'm here today, young voters delivered those two elections. So really young voters did deliver the Senate and the White House to Democrats, which is why we are fighting so hard to turn out Gen Z voters to elect pro-democracy candidates. And I think elected officials on both sides of the aisle are seeing the benefits of speaking directly to Gen Z voters, of acting directly in the interest of Gen Z voters, because when they act in our interest, when they put our futures in mind, when they're taking actions, we realize that, and we turn out for them in turn.
Now, it's an interesting way of putting that, when they take your interests at heart. Right now, nobody on the Democratic side of the aisle seems to feel that they're being taken care of. In fact, I was just seeing some polling done that said, what was it? Something like 6 in 10 African Americans aren't happy with the president, and 6 in 10 wouldn't vote for him again, don't approve. And I'm going, why? Oh, because they don't feel like he's doing enough for them. Does this kind of enthusiasm gap, does this concern you?
I think it's tough. Our political system is so divided that it's tough for either side of the aisle to get anything done. But I think that young people are smart. Young people look at the facts, and young people know who is fighting for them. That's part of what we're trying to do at Voters of Tomorrow. We're trying to make sure that young people know that the pro-democracy coalition is the right way to go. We're not in favor of electing authoritarian governments. Young people voted, 91% of young voters of color voted for Senators Ossoff and Warnock. It's those kind of numbers that we're trying to turn out to help elect pro-democracy candidates. And 91% of voters realized how high the stakes were in Georgia. And we think the stakes are just as high in 2022.
I would argue they're probably higher now, because there are some who are saying, and I don't know if you'll agree or disagree, that this could be the last free and fair open election that we'll have in this country. I don't like to be so hyperbolic, but looking at 19 states passing 34 laws to restrict people's access to the ballot box, a lot of it pointing at young people, I got to wonder what the future does hold for all of us collectively.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a high school student, but it does not take a history professor or a constitutional law expert to realize that our democracy is in crisis. There's a lot of problems going on. Far-right governments are trying to pass legislation that makes it harder, particularly for young people and young people of color to vote. Young people in every group are the most likely to be voter disenfranchised, to have their votes disenfranchised of any racial group or ethnic group. And that really concerns me, because young people are turning out in record numbers in 2018 and in 2020. But if far-right governments realize our power, which they clearly are, if they realize our power and if they take that information and then in turn they pass legislation that makes it harder for us to vote, it's going to be harder for young people to turn out, especially college students. They're targeting college students, and it's going to be much harder for us to deliver the same results in the youth vote.
Now, so you say you're a high school student. When I was in high school, it was all about partying. It was all about, whatever athletic I was involved in. It was about school. It was about, being, 17, 18 years old. Your generation's being kind of saddled with, some different challenges than my generation was saddled with. How are you taking it? And is this are you abnormal in being as active as you are, or is your generation kind of tuned in this moment, knowing the gravity of the moment?
Rick, look at what's happened in the last 20 years. That's what we've grown up with. Those have been the events that have motivated us. So my generation, or a little older than us, we've lived through 2 global recessions, 20 years of conflict in the Middle East, a pandemic, what seems to be like weekly school shootings. And we have a greater degree of difficulty than a lot of other generations. We face these challenges. Some challenges are similar, but just like the pandemic, for example, these are things that are motivating us, but other generations have never seen anything like it. So I think our generation thinks and acts with the future in mind, is what I always like to say. We are dedicated to fixing immediate problems. So those immediate problems being unemployment, those immediate problems being fixing the state of the pandemic. But when I say we think with the future in mind, it means we're dedicated to fixing the systemic issues that are really, we look at our future and we look at our outlook on the country, and these issues like tackling wealth inequality, like gun violence, like climate change, these are the issues that we're really dedicated to fixing in our country. Because when we think about what our futures are going to look like, we got a lot of years here on this planet. I'm 17 years old. So I hope, but most of my generation, we're going to live for decades and decades. And then our children and our grandchildren, we're thinking about the future we want to build for them. Like I said, fixing the systemic issues is really what we're dedicated to, which is why I think my generation is turning out in record numbers. We are historically politically involved. Like you mentioned, I don't think I'm an anomaly. I think there are thousands and tens of thousands of students, young people like me, who care about our country and who are getting involved in politics because we see no other option. We think we've been left behind by politicians who have put access to contributions and access to power over our futures. So Rick, we're taking things into our own hands.
No, and look, as I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking about all of the things that I remember when I was your age. When I was in school, we were the only, the fear of dying came from, is there going to be a nuclear fallout because the Soviet Union's going to bomb us, and we're worried about, mutually assured destruction. And that was never going to happen. And when you look back at it, but I think now to what my kids are going through, having to have drills on active shooter drills, and going, how insane is that? That there literally is an opportunity that they could go to school and not come home. And that's what your generation's been saddled with on a number of levels. And the climate being a huge part of it, because as you said, you're going to be here a lot longer than I am. and what we leave for you might not be worth what's being left.
Right, which is why I think partially having Gen Z involved in politics and government is so important. Every community has their own shared experiences and perspectives and priorities, but our generation, especially like I mentioned, is growing up under particularly unique and chaotic circumstances. COVID is a great example. Climate change, gun violence, these are things that no other generation has lived through to the same degree. I think active shooter drills is a great example of that. So for that reason, because every community has their own shared experiences and identities, every community deserves representation in government, and Gen Z is no different. That's why Voters of Tomorrow, the work we're doing on our team is so important, I think, because people who can understand us, not just because they have children our age or grandchildren our age, but because they are our age, speaking directly to us. I think that's the importance of electing Gen Z leaders. And now I'm not just talking about having young people involved in politics. I'm talking about electing Gen Z leaders here. That's why I think that's so important.
No, I got to tell you, take this however you're going to. I listen to you, Jack, and 17 years old with the kind of grasp on reality that you have, it gives me hope that there may be a future. Because I think back to my 17-year-old self. I was politically active. I did, worked on campaigns and did stuff, but not to the level and to the engagement that you are. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Jack Lobel. Jack is the communications director of Voters of Tomorrow, votersoftomorrow.org, the website if you want to take a look at the work that they do. What if if I was a 17-year-old now and I wanted to get involved in the things that you're doing and push forward on the issues that you guys are working on, how would I go about that?
Voters of Tomorrow, we have some great resources. You can check out our website, votersoftomorrow.org. But honestly, getting involved in your local political community is, I think, the first step that any young person should take. Young people have the opportunity, a historic opportunity, to get involved in local politics. Because I think we've seen that there's a gap where people should be fighting for us, but no one's fighting for us. So that's the importance of getting involved in your community. Local politics, I think, is, like I said, a great start. But I mean, Twitter presents an enormous opportunity for young people to use their voices to tell our leaders what we care about. And Rick, I think, like I said, getting involved in politics as a young person has been so enriching for me. But it's really opened up a lot of doors for me to see what more I can do as a young person. I can't vote, but here I am talking to you about our priorities because oftentimes a voice is louder than a vote. But combined, obviously, very powerful. So that's why we're getting out. We're getting young leaders to use their voices at protests, at marches, and also turn out in the historic numbers they've been turning out in.
No, I mean, it's about getting into the streets and getting out there. I mean, more than just being
Right.
on the keyboard and doing stuff. For me, it's about making people kind of uncomfortable. Make sure you check out votersoftomorrow.org. There are ways to get involved there at the website, I'm sure. Let me ask you this. In looking at the Biden presidency so far, we're a year in. I know a lot of people are, hey, they haven't gotten enough done. I think they've gotten a lot of stuff done in a short period of time, and we're a little stagnant right now. But I'm curious, as a 17-year-old looking at this administration, what's your assessment thus far?
I mean, what we're trying to communicate is that bills like Build Back Better, they do a lot for us. I mean, they're certainly a step in the right direction. They may not go as far as we want, but I think Joe Biden as a president has been fighting for Gen Z in ways that most other presidents do not. Certainly Donald Trump did not. I think Joe Biden fights with our future in mind. One thing I do have to say, we have been calling on the Biden White House to bring Gen Z directly to the table by establishing a Young Americans Advisory Council, which would bring Gen Z and millennial voices directly into the White House to advise Joe Biden on the issues that we care about. There was some Politico reporting recently that Joe Biden's listening to largely a wealthier and older inner circle when advising him on issues specifically around student debt relief. I think things like that, it's so important because it affects us the most to bring our voices to the table. And, Joe Biden has a historic opportunity to do that by establishing a Young Americans Advisory Council. So I think that's one thing that could be improved, but largely we've seen again and again that Joe Biden is fighting for young people's interests, and I'm very appreciative of that.
No, I got to tell you, Jack, you blow me away at your knowledge and your grasp of the issues and your ability to articulate them. Like I said, I'm not blowing smoke. I have hope in the future if there are more Gen Z folks like you out there. I hope people will take a look at the website, votersoftomorrow.org. You can also follow Jack on Twitter. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. Jack, I appreciate you taking time for us. Keep up the great work, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us again at some point down the road.
Thank you, Rick. It's been my pleasure.
Good stuff, Jack Lobel. I look at this, and again, I keep coming back to the reality that, this kid's 17 years old. When I was 17, let's not talk about that because some of that stuff may still be criminal. I'm not getting in the middle of that. But the fact that there are people out there who are fighting like this and understanding the moment that in history that we're in, that there is a party in this country. The Republicans are doing everything they can do to block these kids and others from voting. It's not just minorities. It's people at the bottom. It's these folks. And I'll tell you, I'm frustrated. I'm angry. But, honestly, truthfully, I've got some hope, and the reality is, this kid makes me hopeful. It just is. Anyway, if you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast. If you missed any of it, it's all there for you. Whether you're on Apple, Google, iHeart, Spotify, any of those, Audible, any of them, just search The Rick Smith Show. They'll find it, or just go to thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast. It is right there. But, and again, I come back to this moment. There is so much on the voting front that has to happen. And it makes me go, this is the time where we should be fighting even harder. And I agree with what Senator Coons said. He told ABC that he was gravely concerned about what was going on nationwide with the voter suppression. 19 states, 34 different pieces of legislation. He said, we made significant progress in making it easier for folks to vote in the pandemic in 2020. Why would we be rolling that back in a dozen states that the pandemic isn't over? And that's the question. As we go into this next year, pandemic ain't over, folks. I know we want to believe it is. I know we want to think, it's in the past. Once Omicron goes down, we're going to be all fine. I've got a doctor friend saying, we don't know what's coming around the corner. We're finding out more news that the therapeutics that we thought were going to help us now, not so much. And that the one thing that has helped most of all, the vaccine. Being vaccinated has helped. Is it going to stop you from getting Omicron? No. Might stop you from dying, though. And this is one of those things where you just go, I'm so thrilled that the next generation behind me, or, couple behind me, are at least sane and rational. If the one ahead of me has lost their mind. Just my thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Gonna take a quick break right back after this. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. For working people on the top. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1984. That was the day the Nestle Corporation agreed to terms in order to end a 7-year international boycott against the company. The boycott was over the unsafe and dangerous ways that Nestle marketed and sold its baby formula in third world countries. The boycott began in the United States in Minneapolis, Minnesota. It spread abroad to Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, eventually reaching 10 countries. The campaign was largely grassroots in nature, with local activists organizing different actions. In Massachusetts, boycotters ceremoniously dumped Nestle products in a Boston Nestea party. Finally, after 7 years, the grassroots organizing met its goal. Nestle agreed to follow international standards for baby formula marketing. Boycotts are an important way for consumers and workers to protest corporate practices and social injustice. There have been several very influential boycotts in our nation's history. In the 1950s, the Montgomery Bus Boycott challenged racial discrimination in one southern city and helped to launch the civil rights movement and empower a generation to fight for equality. In the 1960s, Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta of the United Farm Workers called for a boycott of grape and lettuce growers in California. That boycott helped to bring national attention to the fight to improve pay and working conditions for Latino farm workers in California. In the 1980s, a campaign against goods made in South Africa was a stand against that country's apartheid system. In 1984, the members of the International Longshore and Warehouse Union Local 10 refused to unload a South African ship in the port of Oakland. Their action stood as a powerful statement of international worker solidarity for racial justice. Boycotts have long helped to change the course of history as citizens stand together in solidarity.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So here's a smart decision. A group of 27 House members led by Jared Golden are calling on the House leadership to swiftly bring a bill to the floor barring lawmakers from trading stocks. We talked about this before. I said when Nancy Pelosi came out and I said the Republicans are going to move on this and they're going to move quickly and this is going to be a huge issue, something that's got to be addressed. You can't be on the wrong side of this. And finally, you've got a number of House members who are pushing on this, and then the story comes out that now she I don't know, maybe. Now again, this isn't new. This is stuff that comes up every couple of years because somebody gets caught with their hand in the cookie jar. It should be something that should be addressed. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on what's going on, and especially on this, I've asked our good friend, former Ohio Congressman and political analyst Bob Ney to come talk with us. Bob, thanks for taking time.
Thank you, Rick.
So what do you think of this? You got 27 isn't a lot, but them saying, hey, we need this. Is that a big deal?
Well, it is a big deal. I did the 60-minute show, and I'm trying to remember exactly what year I did it, but I know it was before 2013, and I did it with my former Chief of Staff, Neil Volz. And the reason I bring that up, Rick, at that time, before the cameras rolled, 60 Minutes, when we were waiting in the studio, extensively asked me about this, and specifically asked me about then Minority Leader and Speaker Boehner, where I thought they stood on it, et cetera. And I told her I didn't really know much about it. I didn't have any stocks, but I knew, it was the subject all the time in the Congress. And you would hear members of Congress once in a while make some kind of statement that if you were sitting there, Rick, in the privacy of a room, you would think, was that sort of a stock tip, and do you do the wink and nod to your financial advisor, although you're arm's length away,
Yeah.
Do you do it to three other people? So at the time I had told 60 Minutes, my reaction to it is, they should do something with it.
No, I mean, this is years in the making. And the reason I bring it up is I have an aunt who's not overly politically active. But, she texts me and asks me about this out of the clear blue sky. I mean, there's no reason for it. Why is Nancy Pelosi against this? What's she doing? And I'm going, it's not this nefarious plot. But I do think she was wrong. I do think something has to be done because, the narrative, and I'm sure you've heard it as well as everyone else, is that people go into Congress as, they're doing okay and they come out as millionaires. Because everyone believes that they have this kind of access and are pulling this kind of stuff. So for the good of the institution, I think you do have to push something like this.
Right, and again, when 60 Minutes asked back then, they eventually did a story on it, which I saw, and they had brought up Boehner and Pelosi at the time, and there was some heat generated, and then it all went away. Well, then when Senator Burr, in particular, got in trouble. By the way, he hired Alice Fisher, who was the instrumental person in going after me, when I got in trouble. and he hired her because she was a former federal prosecutor, and she got the Justice Department to, agree. By the way, she did Monsanto too. How about that one?
Yeah, no, she's got connections.
Oh yeah, and she got the Justice Department to not pursue any, path, and so that again brought it to the forefront. But I thought the other day when I saw that the speaker said, well, that she wasn't considering doing it, I seriously thought that's probably going to change. This issue it's like pharmaceuticals. If you can actually get something to a vote, there's going to be heat from the average citizen.
Yep.
This is the same thing. People don't know exactly what the bill should do to have a non-conflict, but they know something has to be done, and that members of Congress, let's face it, we are privy, when I was there, privy to all types of, secret information, private information. You've got companies that come in and talk to, you and the staff. So it's conflicts of interest waiting to happen.
I mean, the perfect example came out of Georgia. You had the two Georgia senators who, before the pandemic, they were accused of coming out of a meeting and dumping all of their stuff because they knew, bad stuff's going to happen.
Right.
Now, there was nothing to hold them accountable, and I guess eventually, they decided not to pursue it. But that was a different Justice Department under a different president. And for me, coming out of the last 4 years, out of the 4 years of the former guy, I want these kind of protections now. I think we need to take it to the executive branch as well.
Right, and also it should also apply to key staff, sitting staff people of members of Congress. It should, apply to them too. Yeah. It's just like, look, I got in trouble over the golf trip with Abramoff, and since that time, there was a Abramoff bill, on the floor. But since that time, people are taking trips. They're paid for by, instead of the public, by private interests. So, things just kind of have a way of just creeping back up. And with this stock issue, it gets hot, kind of goes away, gets hot. I think this time that McCarthy, the minority leader, and the speaker are going to have to yield. This one's too hot.
Yeah.
To dismiss.
But Congress right now seems to be kind of like they got to straighten up the house. I mean, you look at the story coming out about, I can never say the guy from Texas, his name, Henry Cuellar.
Oh, Carrero, yeah.
The FBI raids his house. You got this potential bribery of this congresswoman in Illinois who they claim offered a job, to not primary her, I guess, or however that went. And now you've got another Republican who's in trouble because his wife was involved in the office. You got all this stuff going on. You go, don't we need to be helping make sure that the institutions are somewhat, not criminal enterprises?
Well, I mean, it helps, and what also helps is if they refine the ethics process. That will also help. For example, in my case, over and over and over, we were told Tom DeLay took this trip, which he did, not with me, but before, and others have taken this trip. It is approved by the Ethics Committee. So members should be able to actually file the trip, and then ethics says yes or no, for example, and then you do it or you don't based on the sign off. There's ways they can do that, or you just ban any private paid trip. Now that's got to include too lobby groups that are for certain interests. That means the friendly groups that take you to England or Israel or whatever. They've got to come under that too. I mean, there's a lot of different things they're going. Also, the involvement by members of Congress with foreign liaisons and agents. I mean, there's a whole multitude of things. But I think that the stock hits politically extremely sensitive nerve because in today's environment where people are really trying to cope with a lot of things that are going on, and they think, no, these are already wealthy members, some of them who are becoming wealthier because they did a wink and a nod on some inside information, or maybe their staff heard it during a meeting. You can't exclude the executive level staff from this either.
Yeah, I think they should, at the barest of minimums, if they do allow people to have stocks and trade them while in office, every stock that has their name anywhere near it should be publicly posted the second it happens, so at least the rest of us can benefit from their insider trading as well.
Right. Exactly.
Just a thought. I wanted to get your thoughts on the story coming out of D.C. today that, and I love the headline, Biden calls Ducey an SOB. I do find it hysterical. Was my only question is, did Biden know if the mic was on or not? Now they said that he wasn't sure. I think he knew the mic was on.
It's funny that you're asking me this question. I watched that video 6 times. Okay.
As we all did.
I did, yeah. And it's funny you're asking me because my first gut was he knew. And then I thought, no, okay, he didn't. And then I watched it. He knew. He knew it was on. Yes, I'm convinced.
Yeah.
And so he did it, and so what?
So what? And to me, it says, I think Biden's finally had enough, and he's willing to be Joe Biden. And he's willing to just, the guy who would tell it like it is. I think that's a good sign to me, especially now. And I'm curious your thoughts on what's going on in Ukraine, because evidently we've ordered 8,500 troops on heightened alert. What's going on over there? I wanted to get your thoughts on where you think things are going.
I think first of all that Putin, I think, really doesn't want to invade the Ukraine, and then he's there. And how do you get out? It's always the exit plan. It's not the entry. It's always the exit plan. So I think he's trying to manipulate Europe to get what he wants, which is the Ukraine not to officially go in NATO, so that there's no push all the time to, quote, protect the Ukraine, because Putin is afraid of uprising, quotes, against Russia coming out of the Ukraine. So I think it's a aggressive game by Putin to do that. Now, the Ukraine government themselves said, hey, America, you don't need to leave, kind of don't overreact, but we've given the option of the diplomats to get out of there, as Britain has too. As far as the troops, I think we have to face a few facts of life here. After Afghanistan and Iraq, I don't think the American people have the, need, desire, guts, whatever you want to call it, of some kind of conflict coming with our troops on foreign soil.
I agree.
Unless there's incoming missiles into American soil. I just don't see it there. So right now the president's not deploying the troops, but he's got them on standby. So this is sort of our way of countering to tell Putin, we're not going to do this. I mean, we don't want you to do this. But then again, Putin knows he's not stupid. He knows there's no will to do it. So I think it's right now, at this point in time, a bluff game. Look, Europe, Germany in particular, but Europe's dependent. They don't have the energy ability we have. And Germany, it can't afford to get into this. It needs Russia and that pipeline. So I think the president's got to be cautious. The last thing that we need is to somehow get drug in. 8,500 troops versus 100,000 Russians. The numbers aren't there.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, too, hey, I know we're a country that we care about things, but everybody ought to get into these things equally. If we're going to, give this aggressive type of attitude out there and the troops we have, let everybody cough up 8,000.
No, I absolutely agree. But, I was reading a piece by Fiona Hill, who basically said, Putin has us right where he wants us. Or so he believes, because look, he looked, from the time that George Bush looked into his soul and they drove around in his little mini car to the time Trump said, well, why would Russia do anything wrong? He looks at us as, and her assessment is that we look weak, that we're divided, that hell, you got probably a good portion of the country who wants us to side with Russia and be on their side of this. So we are in a weird spot.
Well, yes, we are, and again, of course, I still have the the mindset of Iraq and Afghanistan, but in particular of Iraq and what happened. And, this can build, and the drums can beat, and the behind-the-scenes corporate interests to sell weaponry, and, which we are doing, which is okay, I guess. But that drum can be beaten. And people may get excited and say, protect this and that until something happens. And then when something happens, they will be all over the White House.
I'm of the mindset if you want to arm the folks in the Ukraine, God bless you, fight for your country.
Go for it.
But we do not send our troops there.
No, I think what the president's doing right now, to not second guess him on this one, but he's doing this to do that counter to Putin to say, hey, we're ready to stand by. But that will be different than if he actually executes it and the troops go over, and then the White House said, well, they won't be near the military action. Well, okay, but they're going to be over there, and it's potentially a really bad scene.
Yeah, not good, not a good moment. But Bob, as always, I appreciate the input and your expertise. Great stuff, my friend.
Thank you, Rick.
Our good friend Bob Ney. No, I look at this and as a country, we're not on any footing to be able to go into the kind of conflict that would be. No way, shape, or form. And as I said, the reality is there's a good portion of the country who would side with the Russians. I truly believe there are people in this country right now who would go against Joe Biden and side with Putin. I believe that. And I mean, you look at some of the responses on Twitter and Facebook. You look at some of the social media posts that are out there. It's crazy. And the weird thing is, according to New Jersey Representative Tom Malinsky, he says that he's got people, saying, hey, they watch Tucker Carlson and they're upset that we're not siding with Russia. You go, how is that possible? Because of where they're getting their news and information, because of who benefits from this. But again, it comes down to our, where people are getting their information and their news and what they're willing to do. I got to tell you, as a kid, like I said earlier, as a kid who grew up looking at the Soviet Union, as the potential end of humanity, this idea that people in this country would side with someone who wants to get the old band back together and bring back that, just mind-blowing. It is what it is, though. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you missed any of today's program, thericksmithshow.com. That's where you go to get the podcast, the Rick Smith Show app on the smartphone. Take the program on the go, wherever you go. And as always, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. You got any thoughts? I want to hear it. Any future guests? Lots to get to this week. This Russia thing not going away. Also tomorrow on the program, Senator Sherrod Brown going to be here to share some thoughts on the Intel announcement last week. Lots and lots to get to. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
As Lyndon Johnson used to say about special interests trying to get his support to pass some blatantly self-serving legislation, they can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit. Yet, chicken shit is all that the corporate health complex has to work with, as it frantically tries to defend its current system of mass malpractice known as corporate health care. After all, as most Americans have learned the hard way, the corporatized care of profiteering insurance giants, big pharma, and hospital chains grossly overcharge us while constantly trying to shortchange or outright deny care to millions of our families. So, unable to win public support on their own merit, the corporatists and their hired political hacks are going all out to continue their gouging and keep control of America's dysfunctional system. They're now running a multi-million-dollar PR and lobbying campaign of lies to trash and kill all reforms that would deliver quality, comprehensive care to everyone at far less cost than they can deliver. Masquerading as a partnership for America's healthcare future, the profiteers warn ominously that such reforms as Medicare for all or a public option for health insurance would take away people's choice and our control over healthcare. Hello, we presently have no choice or control. Our care is managed by a handful of insurance, drug, and hospital monopolists whose primary objective is not improving our health, but feathering their own cushy nests. And the undeniable, ugly truth is that they can only continue ripping us off by killing real reform. This is Jim Hightower saying that's one reason the American Medical Association and others are dropping out of the partnership's political front. Honest healthcare practitioners no longer believe it's in their interest or the public's to be part of its chicken PR campaign.
What do the corporate powers from Wall Street to Walmart have in common? They hate the Hightower Lowdown. You can see why at www.hightowerlowdown.org.